The endless night shift. Elias clutched his lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste barely registering against the rising tide of dread. He was the only one left in the sterile office building of Apex Solutions. Normally, the late-night shift meant quiet, a chance to catch up on work without the usual office chatter. Tonight, however, the silence was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the building settling. It all started subtly, a misplaced file here, a flickering light there. Then the whispers began, barely audible at first, like the wind sifting through forgotten corners. They seemed to call his name, a chilling murmur that sent shivers down his spine. At first, Elias dismissed them as exhaustion, remnants of a long week. Tonight, however, the whispers were a chorus, swirling around him in the darkened office. He slammed his laptop shut, the sudden click echoing in the vast emptiness. No, he wouldn't let this get to him. He grabbed his phone, but the signal was dead, another unsettling occurrence. There was no way he could call for help, trapped in this ever-growing darkness. As Elias fumbled for a light switch, a flicker at the end of the hallway caught his eye. Curiosity, laced with a sliver of fear, propelled him forward. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered, the familiar doors replaced by blank, featureless panels. The whispers grew louder, urging him closer to the flickering light. Pushing open a door, Elias found himself not in another office, but in a dusty room filled with archaic computers. A single, flickering monitor displayed a cryptic message. The night shift begins. A wave of nausea washed over him. This wasn't normal. Panic, raw and primal, clawed at his throat. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed a sickly yellow, it radiated an otherworldly chill. It spoke, not with its mouth, but in a voice that seemed to emanate from within Elias's own head. "Welcome, Elias," it rasped. "You are the final key." Terror paralyzed Elias. This wasn't a prank, not a nightmare. This was something else entirely. Somehow, the office building had become a twisted labyrinth, a hunting ground for this entity that preyed on his deepest fear, loneliness. He stumbled back, desperate for escape. But every door he tried led him back to the main hall. Only the layout seemed to shift, morphing into a maze with no exit. Hours blurred into days? Or was it nights? He was exhausted, his mind teetering on the edge of madness. The whispers returned, taunting him with visions of his loved ones, forever out of reach. Just as he was about to succumb to despair, he found a hidden compartment in the dusty computer room. Inside was a worn diary, filled with frantic scribblings. It belonged to a previous night shift worker, trapped and driven mad by the same entity. The final entry mentioned a key and a cryptic sequence of numbers. Hope, fragile and flickering, sparked within Elias. He ran back to the first flickering monitor, his heart pounding in his chest. Typing in the sequence, the screen flashed, revealing a hidden passage within the seemingly blank wall. With a surge of adrenaline, he pushed through the opening, finding himself in a sterile white room. A lone computer sat in the center, its screen glowing softly. On the screen was a single image, a digital clock frozen at midnight. A wave of understanding washed over him. This office building wasn't just a place of work. It was a doorway, activated every night by the clock striking 12. He had to break the loop. Remembering the archaic computers in the dusty room, he raced back, a plan forming in his mind. With trembling hands, he accessed the system, searching for a way to override the clock. Finally, he found it, a program labeled Daybreak. With a deep breath, he ran the program. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic, filled with rage. Then, a blinding white light erupted, banishing the shadows and silencing the whispers. When Elias opened his eyes, he stumbled out into the familiar lobby, bathed in the morning sunlight. He was free, but the memory of the terror lingered, a chilling reminder of the nightmarish world that lurked beneath the mundane. As he stepped out into the bustling city, He knew that others might take his place, their fears exploited by the entity that resided within the seemingly ordinary office building. He vowed to warn them, but his words seemed lost in the cacophony of the city, the weight of his experience too unbelievable to share. He tried to resume his life, but the trauma of his experience gnawed at him. The office, once a symbol of monotonous routine, became a menacing monument to the horror he barely escaped. He requested a transfer, desperately seeking a change of scenery. Weeks turned into months, the fear a constant companion. Then, one night, he woke up with a jolt, a cold sweat clinging to his skin. The whispers were back, faint at first, but growing steadily. Panic clawed at his throat as he realized the nightmare hadn't ended. He looked at the clock on his nightstand, 11:58 p.m. His heart pounded like a drum solo. He knew what was coming. He grabbed his phone, frantically searching for information about Apex Solutions. He found nothing. Desperate, he typed in the cryptic message from the diary. The night shift begins. A single result popped up in a forum hidden on the dark web. Hesitantly, he clicked on it. The forum was filled with chilling testimonies of people who had experienced the same terror within the office building. Most spoke of a slow descent into madness and a sense of being trapped in a time loop. But one post caught his eye. It was from the previous night shift worker whose diary he found. The last entry, dated weeks after his escape, spoke of a recurring dream, a white room with a frozen clock. The final sentence sent chills down Elias's spine. It isn't over. The key is in the dream. A horrifying realization dawned on him. Breaking the loop wasn't enough. He had only delayed the entity's capture of the final key. He was the key. The entity wanted to use his fear to open some unknown door, unleashing something far more terrifying. He couldn't let that happen. He had to find a way to sever the connection to truly break free. With newfound determination, he scoured the forum, searching for answers. He found a single clue, a symbol mentioned in some posts, a crudely drawn eye with a teardrop. It seemed like a long shot, but it was all he had. The next day, he returned to the office building, pretending to need something from his old desk. His heart pounded in his chest as he roamed the familiar halls, searching for the symbol. Finally, he spotted it etched faintly on the underside of the hidden passage doorway. With a trembling hand, he traced the symbol. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and the world around him shimmered. He found himself back in the white room, the frozen clock staring at him with an almost mocking intensity. This time, however, he wasn't alone. The entity stood before him, a skeletal figure cloaked in darkness, its yellow eyes burning with malevolent hunger. It spoke again, its voice a cacophony of whispers. The key unlocks the gate, it rasped. Let the darkness in. Elias, fueled by a desperate defiance, remembered the forum posts. Several mentioned moments of clarity during their ordeal, glimpses of their past lives. He closed his eyes, focusing on a memory, his daughter's laugh, the warmth of her small hand in his. Suddenly, the whispers faltered, replaced by a deafening silence. When he opened his eyes, the entity was gone. The air crackled with a strange energy. Then, he noticed a crack forming on the surface of the frozen clock. It started small, then grew rapidly, spiderwebbing across the glass. Panic surged through him. Was this it? Was he breaking free? Or was he unleashing something worse? With a shattering sound, the clock face broke apart. Instead of the expected flood of darkness, however, a blinding light erupted from within. Elias shielded his eyes, but he couldn't help but peek. In the blinding light, he saw a figure, not menacing but ethereal, radiating warmth and compassion. The figure spoke, its voice a gentle melody. "You have chosen love over fear," it said. "The gate remains closed. You are free." As the light faded, Elias found himself back in the office lobby, the morning sun streaming through the windows. He stumbled out, weak but alive. The whispers were gone, replaced by the sounds of the city waking up. He looked back at the office building, now bathed in ordinary sunlight. It looked almost harmless. He walked away, knowing the experience had changed him. He wouldn't forget the horror, but he wouldn't let it control him.